channel, Treetop Flight, where I'm documenting the build of my RANs S21 Outbound plane. This is the final in my wing series where I'll be installing and sealing the fuel tanks. First, I'd like to say that these are not instructional videos. I'm a first-time builder and I'm documenting the build as it might be interesting to other builders or anyone who's interested in planes, but these are not instructional. People also ask me about the hours involved in building, and the fuel tank assembly and installation took me 63 hours. That brings my build to 407 hours to date. I'm now estimating my total build time to be 12 or 1300 hours. Your mileage may vary. I did make a fairly significant mistake in this portion of the build. I cover that later, and if you're a builder looking to watch how others do it, I encourage you to get to that section. It's where you drill out the air vent for the fuel cap assembly. RANs did make a change in the air vent parts as well as the procedure, and I think they could have done a better job or been a little more clearer on the drill out of the hole. I made the mistake. I assume others can, and it's fairly significant in fixing it, and I'll cover that later, but if you're interested, go to that section. I also wanted to talk a little bit about the different sealants and products that you'll use. They're different than other parts of the plane, and they were a little confusing to me at first, so I assume they are to others. First, you do use the good old Loctite blue. There's some external threads that don't have exposure to petroleum or fuel, and that's just your basic Loctite blue, which you probably have on hand. Then they also call for a thread sealant in several places that does have some petroleum exposure, and this is Loctite 567. It's not very expensive. I think it was like $12 for a small tube. You use that on several of the fitting pieces in the fuel line assembly. Then this is the big one. This is that Dow 730 petroleum-based thread sealant. This tube was about $130. I couldn't find a smaller portion of it. You're only going to use it for 5 screws and the air fitting. So you use very little of it. It's got a 9-month shelf life, so other than moving it forward to other builders, I'm not sure what else you're going to do with it. But it is necessary, and I would discourage substituting it for any others because it is near your fuel supply. And you don't want any deterioration or parts dropping into your fuel tank. And I don't think it's got a decent substitute. The other is the last unique sealant is your Pro Seal or Chem Seal. Chem Seal is I think it was on the Vans website. It's a similar product. I don't want to say it's the exact product as the Pro Seal. They have a very similar description. It's used by a lot of builders. Many use Pro Seal, some use the Chem Seal. You can get this in squeeze tube dispensaries. I've got the larger version because I was mixing. It's a 10-to-1 mixture by weight, and I used a scale to mix it. It's very gooey and tar-like, so it's just a mess to put on, but I'll cover that in my video. It can go on without not a lot of trouble. So these are the unique sealants that you'll probably run into, and you'll see that throughout the video. And with that, let's get started with the fuel tank assembly. The first thing after going through your parts list, and they give you your first item is to create a little aluminum jig that you're going to use for drilling a hole in the top of the tank. I think it's going to go right into that hole. And they tell you to use about a 1.5 inch piece of aluminum and create a jig, drill some holes in it, and we'll get that started. I've got that set up over here. I've cut my aluminum piece. I've got my holes marked. I did use the dimple tool to make sure I get a good accurate mark on it. And I will drill my number 40 on the ends and a number 30 in the middle. I've attached this little homemade jig to that hole and lined it up the way they instructed with some self-tapping screws. Then you remove that root rib from your wing, and you got to remember you've got some stuff blocking it and you've got your cables coming through. So I removed the root rib, and they tell you to slide the tank into the wing. I'm going to jump back and insert this into a prior part of the video because I found a gotcha. In the diagram where you're putting this centering ring on top of your tank before you cut it, the figure 0611 shows you putting this center hole in and where to drill it and how to mark the center. But that's not really correct. Later in the directions, you find that you're to drill this hole after the tank is in here, and you center this hole by the center of the ring that is created by the skin. So when your tank is in, this metal guide is on that hole that came on top of the tank, but the centering hole that you drill isn't going to be the exact center of the hole that was in the plastic. When the tank is in there, you kind of move it forward so that your sight gauges aren't blocking the hole. So you move your tank forward, and when you get your tank all settled, then you draw the center point of the skin hole, not the center point of the tank hole. And that hole might be a little bit off here, but when you go to cut it in your tank, the center hole that they gave you is going to be gone anyways, and you're going to create your 3-inch hole from the center point of this hole. I just saw another builder. He made the same mistake I did, but if you follow the 0611 figure, they does tell you to drill that hole in there, but then later in the instructions, they tell you to drill the hole from the center of this skin. So it's a little bit conflicting in the manual, so I'm going to jump that back in if that helps any builder. Thanks. Okay, that goes in there pretty tight. You got to work it in around those tank supports and slide it right up to that next rib. But we got it in. Now they want you to replace the root rib back into place, and you got to remember that the root rib goes underneath these guys, so you got to come up with a system to have these up while you slide your root rib in. Getting this rib underneath this tank support and sliding it in is a real bear. So I saw someone mention some wire, so I think this is what they did. I put the wire under there, and that didn't work. What ended up working is I used just a putty pallet, got it underneath, and picked up the rib like this while I picked up the tank support while I slid the rib in. It still didn't go in easy, so I don't have advice for how to do this well. Probably check another video. I did get it in. I did get the rib in there. You then make a sight gauge, they call it, out of a 1-inch dowel and a scrap piece of aluminum. And you want the hole as close to the center as you can get, because what you're going to do is you're going to slide it into this hole. And you're using a number 11 pilot hole in the middle. And you get it so it's flush and flat, and then you're going to put your drill bit in there, and you're going to make a mark on the tank. You're not going to drill the tank, you're just going to make a mark. And then when you take your rib rod out, root rib out, you're going to make sure that that mark is pretty much in the center of where the little indentation is in there. It'll make more sense when I get this rib off. I've drilled out my 2 sight gauge holes to 1/2 inch, one there, only on the inboard side. I used the step bit to go up to the 1/2 inch. That seemed to work well. Nice clean cut, pretty easy. Then they want you to cut a 3-inch hole using that center point as your center for the gas cap. My Dremel has got an attachment for circular cutting. I don't know exactly what they call it, but I'm going to use this. There's a couple different ways. You can also just get a 3-inch circular bit. I don't have one of those, but the Dremel's got this attachment, so this should work. So we'll cut that 3-inch hole out. Okay, we'll see how this goes. I've actually never used this Dremel circular cutter before, and I didn't want to run down to Home Depot to buy a 3-inch cutter. I've made so many trips to Home Depot, and this should work. If not, I will go get that 3-inch cutter. I've got about every other size, but I didn't have 3-inch. So what I did is I actually drilled a small pilot hole to sink this blade into and then start my cut. So let's see how this goes. Okay, so far so good. I turned my speed up a little bit, and I actually forgot to turn the camera on when I was going to film it. But I did get a nice, perfect 3-inch hole. It's right inside each of the dots I made. The next step is to take your gas cap assembly and the support ring that goes underneath inside the tank. You're going to insert this into the tank. There's a vent hole, a large hole that's going to face the outboard side. I'm going to Cleco it on and then transfer drill the holes into the tank, deburr and clean up. Okay, I'm at another slightly confusing section of the manual, and I'm going to show you what I did. I think it's going to work, but it's not completely clear. Number 10 in the manual says, set the fuel cap flange into the hole with the large drilled hole outboard. So that's this air filter hole. If I center this into the hole, imagine this is now inside the hole, center the cap assembly in the 3-inch hole. So this to me is the cap assembly, which that means I'm going to have to center this onto this in here and then Cleco it. It seems if I just line the flange up on top of the hole, I can countersink my hole into the tank from up here without having to strap this whole thing. These holes are in the same place whether this is under there or not. So I literally can just mark the holes and transfer drill them without having to try and clamp this whole assembly together, while this is it, and Cleco it and held together. All the holes are in the same place. So I'm gonna mark it, center it up, and then transfer drill my holes this way. That seemed to work fine. I've got the 5 holes drilled. The one for the air vent is not drilled. The flange is perfectly centered in the hole from the skin marking. These holes are right on mark with the cap, so they're going to fit the doubler right on. So I think we're good to go on that. And now they want me to drill a hole in the side for the fuel drain, I believe. So that's just a small hole. I'll get that taken care of and move on. Okay, the next step is I'm going to take a bunch of these fittings for this section right in here, and we're going to run a wire through the tank in the bulkhead fitting area, and then there's 5 3/4-inch parts that we're going to thread on that wire, and I'll take a look at it, read the instructions, and figure out how to thread this. Okay, it looks like we're dealing with this section right here. It looks like we're going to have the bushing with the O-ring, which goes down the wire inside the tank. The threads will come outside, so this O-ring is going to go up against the tank. And then on the outside of the tank, we start with the rubber washer, the thick washer, and then the nut. And then we'll have blue Loctite inside the nut. And that appears to be the order of things. So we'll get that put on. Okay, I got this guy in. It is a reverse thread. You got to remember that, the 3/4. Okay, we're going to follow the same process for the fuel sight gauge. The other thing is, of course, you don't need to run the wire to thread these. If you've got a somewhat small hand, I've got medium to large, I can get my hand in there. Uh-oh, I did the other one pretty well. Here it is. And if you got a smaller hand or someone's smaller hand, you can just thread it. There we go. You can thread it that way and then add your things without having to run the wires. But I'm getting scarred from getting my hand in and out of there. A smaller hand would work. There is a nice feature about tightening these locks. Remember, the reverse thread, but there's an Allen wrench connection on the inside which allows you to tighten it by holding the inside with your Allen wrench. As I was doing my editing, I realized I had more content than I thought, and I really don't like putting out 30-minute videos, so I am going to split this into 2 videos. This is part 1 of the fuel tank video, and I'll have a second one out shortly. Thanks for watching.